Today for another business hour of English to help you improve on your business English in every aspect: listening, writing, speaking, fluency, pronunciation, all those type of things that we can help you with for your business English. Now, what I'm going to look at today is we're going to look at a bit of news. We'll look at the pronunciation by looking at some articles. We'll revisit a business phrasal verb and a business idiom. We'll also be looking at the Scottish accent, because sometimes the Scottish accent can be tricky for some people, but maybe it's just a case of not being used to the Scottish accent, and there's nothing really wrong with it, which there isn't. And we'll also do other things. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you over and we're going to look at what was happening in the news wrap-up. So let me bring this up here, and I'm going to pause down here. And in the wrap-up here on LinkedIn News, I want to draw your attention to some specific words or words you may not know and vocabulary along with the pronunciation. Before I get into it, a shout out or a thank you to my new connections here on LinkedIn. Very glad you can be here. I'm providing you with business English and hoping that I can help you advance and understand a bit more and help you in your business English on a day-to-day basis. So let's get into our first one here, which is, and I want to make sure that this is indeed the first one. Yes, it's not the first one. Okay, I'm going back. Sustainability. H&M starts a joint venture to resell and recycle millions of garments. Garments are clothes. That's another word or a synonym for clothes. Moving down, H&M has teamed up with recycling company Remondis to give new life to 40 million items used items of clothes. I'm going to have to go back and say this again. New life to 40 million items of used clothes this year. The venture will collect used garments across Europe and expects to resell 60% and recycle a third. The fashion industry, which produces 100 billion new items each year, is under pressure to become more sustainable. Okay, so let's have a look up here. We have a phrasal verb at the top here, which is to team up. To team up with. So we'll team up with, and that means to collaborate. Okay, a recycling company, so H&M, are collaborating with Remondis. They are teaming up with them. That's a useful phrasal verb, and you can use it in a business sense, or often two artists perhaps will do a collaboration. You say they teamed up. Okay, down in we have garments again, which are clothes, and we have looking at how to talk about numbers here. 40 million is the M, down to 60% with the percent behind the number, and 100 billion. If we had dollars here, we would say 100 billion dollars. And did you notice that I didn't say 100? I said 100. So when we have one, we generally say a person, a man, a woman, not one man, one woman. Sounds a bit strange. So moving on then to our next one. Toys. Lego introduces new characters to make play more relatable. Lego is introducing a new set of characters with physical, mental, or cultural differences, such as ADHD, Down syndrome, and language barriers. We got language barriers here, okay. Lego's research found that 70% of 6 to 12-year-olds want to see emotions beyond smiley or happy, while more than 90% said it's vital to discuss big emotions and have diverse friends. Okay, let's go back and unpack some of this vocabulary and pronunciation. Characters to play more relatable. Lego is introducing a new set of characters with physical, mental, or cultural differences, such as ADHD. ADHD is an acronym and it stands for, this is what we say it means. We say it stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. A lot of people complain that everybody seems to have ADHD now. All the kids have ADHD, but in our day, it just meant you had a lot of energy. That's a what we call a debatable point, and often you'll hear it mentioned as a moot point. M-O-O-T, moot point, which means it's debatable. You might say this, and I might say something else. It's a moot point or debatable point. Down syndrome. I think it's Downs with an S actually, Down syndrome, and language barriers. Now, I wonder what language barriers is, because I was talking to someone this morning, student, and we were talking about when you have a language difficulty. In this case, it was a stammer or a stutter, and this is when people find it difficult to get the words out. Not in a language sense where I don't know what the translation is, more in their own language, they have a problem, and this is called a stammer. Now, Lego's research found 70%, 6 to 12. So when we have numbers with 6 to 12-year-olds, this is very interesting, actually. We say 12-year-olds. When we're talking about the group, we'll talk about with an S at the end, 12-year-olds. 12-year-olds like Godzilla, for example. But if I talk about my son or my daughter as an individual, I will say she is a 12-year-old. And then for her age, I'll say she's 12 years old. You're gonna have to rewind this video to actually get your head around that, because it is very complicated. She's 12 years old. She's a 12-year-old, and her friends are 12-year-olds. Sorry about that. Blame the English language. Okay, moving on to the next one. Number 3, work life. What 60-year careers could look like. People are living longer, and that means they are also working longer. The traditional 40-year career could morph into a 60-year career. The Wall Street Journal writes, a shift that may change the Wall Street Journal writes, a shift that may change the way we think about work. Moves across sectors could become more common, just like career breaks and stints back at school. So we have some vocabulary here. What 60-year careers could look like. A career is your work life. In some languages, it means a degree, what you do in university. But a career in English is when you start working to when you stop working. That is your professional life. That is your career. You may have one career, a career in architecture. You can also break it up to a career in engineering. When you start and when you stop your working life in that particular area. The traditional 40-year career could morph, which means to morph, means to change into a 60-year career. A shift down here, a shift means, a synonym for shift means a move. A move that may change the way we think about work. Moves across sectors, well, there you go. Across sectors, areas, could become more common, just like career breaks and stints. A stint is an amount of time. I did a stint, perhaps a football player does a stint as a manager after their football career. But it didn't work, so a stint is generally a short time. It'd be interesting to see how this works out. I think careers, people are becoming more flexible, moving across areas. Graphic designer then decides, well, I don't only want to work in graphic design. I'm quite interested in architecture. I'd like to move into that type of career. So that seems to be something that in the past was frowned upon. We say frown, this is a frown. It was something that was not taken seriously. People would often say a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And it was kind of an insult. Whereas nowadays, that expression meant you know a lot of different things, but you're not a master of any. But now it can be seen as a positive to know many different things and use those skills to adapt to your new working environment. On to number 4. Idea of the day. Managers should first of all manage themselves. It's hard to lead others when you're not taking proper care of yourself first. When managing others, don't forget to manage yourself as well, says Elisa Cohn. Manage your time, manage your network, support, and insight from outside. Manage your health. Exercise and sleep will give you strength to manage tomorrow. Okay, so if you are a manager, it is very important that you are mentally in the proper, correct state of mind. It's something I've been looking at with my students today, is leadership. And we'll be looking at a leader coming up, possibly after this. I can't disagree here. Let me look at some words, vocabulary. It's hard to lead others when you're not taking proper care of yourself when managing. Network, support, and insight from outside. Insight is information. Manage your health, exercise, and sleep will give you the strength to manage tomorrow. Okay, I agree. I can definitely get behind that. And now we have today's debate. Do you feel like you can bring your whole self to work, all of yourself to work? It's from Yulia Bar, VP, Vice President, People and Teams Efficiency. There are a lot of conversations about whether to bring your whole self to work. Oh, it did it again. I gotta press pause down here. We call that pause, the 2 lines, the pause button. There are a lot of conversations about whether to bring your whole self to work. For me, it's not the point. Do you even need to ask yourself this question? If you're in a safe environment, this is not a decision that needs to be made. If you are surrounded with colleagues who encourage you to become a better version of yourself, you simply bring your best self to work. Okay, this is something that is new to English. And if we look here in the orange, it says if you are in a safe environment. Safe environment nowadays tends to mean if you're in an environment that you feel comfortable in, not like before when we felt safe, as in I'm not going to be harmed or attacked by someone. Nowadays it means I feel safe to be myself, I feel safe to say what I want to say, I feel comfortable. So let's look at this again. Let's revisit. There are a lot of conversations about whether to bring your whole self to work. For me, it's not the point. Do you even need to ask yourself this question? Are you in a safe environment? This is not a decision that needs to be made. If you are surrounded by colleagues who encourage you to become a better version of yourself, you simply bring your best self to work. So if the work environment is great and positive, you will naturally bring your best self to work. Again, hard to argue. You can join the conversation there in LinkedIn to see if you have any comments to add your opinion. And we're going to move across now to our phrasal verb. Okay, and I'll just double check that we are there. Over here, our phrasal verb is to point out. I brought this to the attention of people last week, and we'll just go over it again. Maybe revisit, go over. Phrasal verb, point out, is a phrasal verb that means to indicate something. So I'm pointing out, oh, look at that. Oh, I'm pointing. Or figuratively, to make people think about something. So let's look at some examples over here. And I want to first, yes, I am indeed in the way. So I'm going to just make myself a bit smaller down here. Okay. Can you point out the mistakes in this report? So can you show me where the mistakes are in this report? Number 2, she pointed out the interesting sights as they drove through the city. So that is physically pointing out, oh, look at that. That over there is the school that I was in when I was younger, and that over there is the first place I worked. I'm pointing out physically. The teacher pointed out the key points in the lesson. The teacher can either say these things or point them out physically behind the teacher. But you can also point out and say, number 1, the most important point of leadership is, and I can say them. and I'm drawing your attention to this. And then finally, he pointed out that they were running late for the meeting. So he pointed out, right, guys, just to remind you, we're running late for the meeting. He pointed out. So it can be physically or figuratively. Now I'm going to go on and we're going to look at our human resources question, which is, can you tell me about a favorite boss that you've had and what made them a great leader? So if you're new to watching me, sometimes what I've been doing lately is looking at some human resources questions that can come up in typical interview questions. And this one is, tell me about a favorite boss you had and what made them a great leader. Often when we don't know if it's a man or a woman, we'll refer to them as them. So let's unpack this one. One of my favorite bosses was Jane, who I worked with at ABC Company. She was an amazing leader because she was always approachable and willing to listen to her team. She had a great sense of humor and her positive attitude was contagious. She made sure to give credit where credit was due, and she never hesitated to offer help or support when needed. She also provided clear direction and expectations, but still allowed for flexibility and creativity within the team. Overall, she created a work environment that was enjoyable and productive, and I learned a lot from her. So you could take this as a standard kind of response and shape this into the way that you want to answer this particular question. I think there's some interesting things here that we can draw some attention to. She was an amazing leader. Always speak well of your ex-boss, and if you don't want to, you don't always have to speak well of them, but don't speak badly of them. Because she always approachable. That approachable means not that she is coming to you, but she is open to you going to her. She has that, you get the feeling, or it is a fact, that you can always go and talk to her in this case. And willing means wanting, to listen to her team. She had a great sense of humor. She was funny. She was likable. She was perhaps charming. And her positive attitude was contagious. So her positive attitude then in turn affected all of the team. She made sure to give credit where credit was due. This is an expression in English, credit where credit's due, which is if you did well on something, she would say, we'll just use my name, James, well done for sticking with the client and offering them alternatives. You did really well there. She's giving me credit because I deserve it. So credit where credit is due, credit where it is deserved. And she never hesitated to offer help or support when needed. Okay, so she is, we could say she's compassionate. She also provided clear direction and expectations. She was communicative. She said what she wanted, and she was organized and she was communicative. This is what I want, and this is how we shall do it. And she allowed for flexibility and creativity within the team. So she trusted you to work on your own, but also being open whenever you have any issues, problems that you need. Overall, she created a work environment that was enjoyable and productive, and I learned a lot from her. So good leaders can then in turn create positive work environment and make you more productive. And then you can ask for a 4-day week. That's a topic for another day, 4-day week. But I've been talking a lot about leadership with my students this week. And now what I want to do, talking about leadership, I hope this is a good answer for you or something that you can work with, a common interview question, and something that when you're talking again about an old boss, you want to speak what they gave you, what you admired in them, and what you learned from them. And then with a bad boss, you can also say, you're not going to say they're good, but you can say what you learned from that situation. So I'm going to bring you over now to someone who has been a leader. She is Nicola Sturgeon, and she resigned from her post in the as the Scottish Prime Minister. So we're going to listen to her accent. We're going to listen to her accent. We're going to listen to who she was as a leader. She was. Some people loved her. Some people hated her. Let's just listen. I'll grab my headphones and I'll listen with you. And where necessary, I'll make some comments.
Should be in Scotland's hands.
One of the most powerful politicians in the world, an election-winning machine.
But for me, who the leader is that takes Scotland to independence is less important than that Scotland completes its journey to independence.
But do you feel that it will still be you?
Yes, I do.
Today I am announcing my intention to step down as First Minister and leader of my party. Thank you.
So just a bit of context here. Nicola Sturgeon was the Prime Minister of Scotland for the Scottish National Party, a very popular independence minded party in Scotland. She has been the leader for quite a while now. And what we're focusing on here as well is listening to her accent, which is distinctly Scottish. I'm not saying it's difficult, but it's when you hear it as an English speaker, you go, that's a Scottish accent. So she has stepped down or she has resigned. Let's again listen again. You'll hear the English accent and you'll hear her Scottish accent.
But do you feel that it will still be you?
Yes, I do.
Today I am announcing my intention to step down as First Minister and leader of my party. Thank you.
Interesting point here is she quickly rose through the ranks. This is a good business expression, which means she was climbing the ladder. So she started at a low level and she rose. The verb here is to rise, like bread in an oven. It rises. She, and in the past, simple past, is she rose. She rose through the ranks. She went up through the ladder, the corporate ladder, let's say. Another word. Okay, pro-independence, they had a referendum, which is a vote, in Scotland in 2014. The vote for independence, it was rejected. And of course, if you are the minister at the time, Mr. Salmond, he resigned and she succeeded him. To succeed is to come in when that person resigns. It's the next person to come in.
To become the leader of the party that I joined as a teenager is the biggest privilege of my life.
If you're not aware, Scotland is still part of the UK. Their parliament sits in Westminster in England. And as you can see, they won a large majority for the Scottish area.
This ruling confirms that the notion of the UK as a voluntary partnership of nations, if it ever was a reality, is no longer a reality.
So what happened is recently there was a legal decision which said that there has been a referendum on independence for Scotland, and legally now there cannot be another referendum.
I don't know what stay alert means. Stay at home except for X, Y and Z is a clear message, and it's one that I think allows you to make the judgment.
into the Scottish Government's handling of harassment complaints. Harassment is when you are perhaps sending emails to people or calling people, annoying them constantly, and they don't want it. It is in court, it would be called harassment. Often you can have this in the workplace, colleagues harassing you, your boss is harassing you. It's unnecessary. It's unnecessary, and that is harassment.
As First Minister,
I'm sorry, just bringing you back as well to here. The word predecessor means the person before her. So that would be Alex Salmond.
as First Minister, I refused to follow the age-old pattern of allowing a powerful man to use his status and connections to get what he wants. I believe I acted properly and appropriately, and that overall I made the best judgments I could.
Okay, this is quite interesting. Yes, she has this very polemic at the moment, controversial issue of trans, allowing people to have operations and so on at a certain age, and this has been very controversial with her. So the situation of the trans is basically where somebody can, let's say in this case what happened was amid controversy over the placing of a transgender rapist in a woman's prison. So what happened is you get a guy who is a big guy, and he was a rapist. He convicted rapist, which means he sexually assaulted someone. He was convicted in a court, and then at some point said, I don't see myself as a man. I identify as a woman, so I want to go to a woman's prison. So he was, this seems ridiculous to some people, but for other people, it's somebody who just says, I am a trans person. And he was sent to a women's prison. And this guy doesn't look like a woman. And some people see this as an easy way for some men to then just get into women's prisons. And so this is a big controversy for her. It could have led to her downfall.
My question is, are all trans women women? You haven't answered that question.
Well, that's not the point that we're dealing with
That's
here.
the question I'm asking.
Trans women are women, but in the prison context, there is no automatic right for a trans
So
woman.
there are contexts where a trans woman is not a woman.
No, there is.
Being your First Minister has been the privilege of my life. Nothing, absolutely nothing I do in future will ever come anywhere close.
And that's from The Guardian. So it's really quite, it's quite interesting. She was a successful leader. What she did during the pandemic was seen as quite, I would say, as you can see, she saw a lot of prime ministers come and go in England, and she stayed for a long time. I think maybe her time ran out. She's been there for a long time. She ran on the idea of a referendum in Scotland that we want to leave. And then when the court result came that no, you cannot have a second referendum, and then it just seems quite difficult. We say her position is untenable, which means she can no longer stay in this position. It just doesn't make sense. And then, of course, this big controversy, which is happening in a lot of countries at the moment, of the trans situation. Let me just make myself a tiny bit bigger here. I'm a little small while I'm talking. So she made herself a target, really, where a lot of people are alienated by this situation of trans. It's seen as quite controversial in many countries, and just controversial in general. It's a lose-lose situation, and that's what I want to talk about now. Is my next idiom, which is a win-win situation, and we call that a segue, where I kind of go from one thing to another. So a segue into this idiom. A win-win situation. A win-win situation is a business idiom that refers to a situation in which all parties involved benefit or gain something positive. So it's good for you and it's good for me. It's a win-win. So let's give an example of a merger. The merger between two companies was a win-win situation. The combined resources allowed for increased efficiency and profitability while also expanding the product line and customer base. So the merger between two companies was a win-win situation. The combined resources allowed for increased efficiency and profitability while also expanding the product line and customer base. So yeah, one win-win situation before that, I'm not so sure if it's still win-win, is the merger of Nissan and Renault. That's been in the news because of possibly separating. It was a win-win, but it doesn't look like it's still a win-win. But there's an issue about their EV, electric vehicles. Well, let's see what happens there. Let's watch this space and see what happens. A very common expression to use in all areas of life is a win-win situation. Just basically, if it's good for you and it's good for me, or if it's good for him, and both parties, both people, both groups benefit, it's a win-win. All right, let's move on down. And this is what I'm going to end with, and this is how we can disagree in a meeting. And just before we get into this, if this has been useful for you, please let your colleagues or your friends know. It's perfectly free. This is absolutely free in association with LK Formación, where I work. And we're just doing this for your benefit. No strings attached, which means you don't have to buy anything or anything. Okay, just hoping that I can help you. And what would be great for me is you can just give me a thumbs up or a little clap on LinkedIn, or subscribe, share. That's all I'm asking them, and I really hope I'm helping you. I hope I'm speaking clearly as well. On YouTube, you'll be able to get the subtitles. So last one here, how to disagree in a meeting. So very common for people who are not native English speakers and have trouble often disagreeing or feeling comfortable disagreeing, let's say. So let me just sell it bigger here. So one way that you can disagree is saying, I appreciate your suggestion, but I have a different perspective on this. I believe what we should focus on X instead, as I think this will provide a better solution for Y. Can you tell me more about your thoughts on this? So you're disagreeing, but you're also then re-engaging the person. Okay, you're not completely embarrassing them. You are then re-engaging them by asking them about their thoughts. So I appreciate your suggestion, but I have a different perspective on this. You'll often hear, it's very common for when people disagree with you and they give you a reason or they say something. Another way you can say is, I appreciate that, or I appreciate your suggestion, or I appreciate your point, but it's generally always followed by a but. And that means, thanks for that, however, and it's very common and it's quite good to use and it sounds nice. The next one is, I understand where you're coming from, but I think we need to consider Z as well. From my experience, this has proven to be effective in similar situations. Would you be open to exploring this other option together? So again, disagreeing, but not trying to embarrass the person. You're actually re-engaging them and just letting them know that I'm disagreeing with you, but I'm not. But I would like you to participate. So I think this can be useful. I understand where you're coming from. I see what you mean. I understand where you're coming from. Like I know what you're trying to say. So that is what that means. I understand where you're coming from means. I know what you're trying to say. However, and then you can give your explanation. So there you go. That's it for today. I hope it's been useful. I hope I can have helping you with your business English. You can check over on YouTube if you want to see the subtitles. Of course, you can revisit this. As I said, thanks to you guys for connecting with me. Thanks for listening to me. Give it a share if it's been useful for you. And look out for the mini shorts that I will be uploading for business expressions and other things as well. I'll be focusing on, and I'll be back next week as well with the business hour. So have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week.